I think in a world of technology, but even more so in a world of AI, no matter what you decide to do, your choices are virtually unlimited. There are so many different ways to make a living. There are so many different companies you could work for. And so being able to think through and leverage that mindset of how do I take an entire universe of possibilities and figure out how to select the right one.
Should new employees and college grads be scared that the amount of open roles is going to be taken over by tech and AI?
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, today I'm thrilled to welcome Alison Baum Gates, an early-stage tech investor, accomplished author, and future of work expert who's on a mission to reshape how we think about career, capital, and innovation. And as a general partner at Semper Virens, she's raised hundreds of millions of dollars and backed over 70 companies, including 9 unicorns, 24 successful exits, and serves on 10 boards. Are those numbers right? I hope they are. Well, we have we have a lot to get into. Let's not forget, we are going to talk about her book, Breaking into Venture, a field guide style book that demystifies venture capital, and so much more. Let's get to it. Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, awesome. We first met at, I think it was Transform last year in Las Vegas. I walked into that party and I just felt the energy that I'm around like-minded folks that are really connected in the space, but also looking to do more, right? And really looking to do more than just invest, but how do we help companies and people grow? And I immediately felt that connection. We continued to build our relationship, and here we are today. But before we get into all that fun stuff about the present, let's hit the rewind button. And I'm always curious with successful entrepreneurial minded folks like yourself, did your parents have that DNA? What, if you don't mind me asking, what did they do for a living?
I actually grew up watching both my parents' jobs be disrupted by technology. They were both creative. My father was an architect. My mother was a graphic designer. And so technology changed the way they practiced their businesses. My dad eventually went to the Chicago Board of Trade and was working as a Eurodollar option specialist there. He was like the guy in the pit, yelling.
So from architecture to that.
Stuff. Yes.
Wow. So he had a pivot.
He had a pivot for sure. And then that job got replaced by technology as well. So the pit is now closed. It's all done digitally. And so from a young age, I saw how stressful that was for them and really wanted to avoid that for myself.
That is so fascinating, because if you look back at technology, I mean, people like to use the analogy with AI now and looking to like Henry Ford with the assembly line, like that replaced horses, right? This is just what happens. It's called innovation. And we're going to park that part of the conversation now, because I certainly want to get into it a little bit later. But talking about your career and pivots and everything, you went from the trading floor at Goldman Sachs into General Assembly and then, moved into capital. What were those early lessons that really started to shape the way you evaluate opportunities now?
Yeah, I mean, I think my journey was eye-opening, especially given the context of wanting to avoid being my parents, which I'm sure a lot of young people think about. But, I was dead set on that, worked really hard, got into college and coming out, got this job at Goldman and thought, okay, this is going to be sort of my ticket to a long-term career. And being on the trading floor during the financial crisis, the exact same thing happened to me that I had watched happen to my dad.
Isn't that crazy?
It was nuts. I mean, I think there was that combination of a macroeconomic shock and technology advancing, where a lot of what was happening on the trading floor was being automated. And although my job itself wasn't being eliminated, it was just clear that the trajectory that I was on looked dramatically different than it would have if I had started 10 years ago. And so
interesting.
I wanted to get into the disrupting side instead of the disrupted side, where I could be the one sort of making a difference, calling the shots, reshaping the industry, as opposed to being the person trying to keep up with it.
Such a paradigm shift, right, in thinking, but that comes from experience, right? That comes from saying, I don't want to be on that side of the table anymore. I want to be on this side. and how do you get there? Let me ask you this. Did you have a conversation with your dad at that point? Like, did you guys have that type of relationship where you could say, hey, Dad, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, what advice do you have for me?
That's an interesting question. No is the short answer. I feel like it's always kind of a fine line with your parents, right? Because you're want to be respectful and appreciative of everything that they've done. And both of my parents just worked so hard. And I really respected that. I think I was intent on taking the lessons and applying it to my own life. But I don't know that I was necessarily thinking about it. Like, I think there was also just the day to day reality of I was sitting on a trading floor, which was already a high stress
Right.
environment. On top of that, all of these extremely driven type A people who are ultra competitive are recognizing that the window is closing for opportunity, and so it goes from a collaborative to a really competitive cutthroat culture. And that
Interesting.
from a day-to-day perspective, that also reached a breaking point for me where I just felt like I just can't do this anymore. Like, I'm so unhappy and I don't have to be.
And you don't have to be. That's a key words right there, where there is a choice. And
Mhm.
it's an interesting conversation when we talk about choice, because not everybody has a choice depending on their career path and everything. But you saw the writing on the wall. And did you see at that point, based on your trading experience, that you had this power of trend spotting or opportunity spotting that led you down this path?
I think on the trading floor, I embraced my ability to be creative with my ability to be practical in financial markets and the type of work that I was doing. I was working with large investors who came to me with a view of the world. They said, I think Greece is going to default on their debt. What is the most efficient way for me to make money off of that
Hmm.
opinion? And that was the analytical work that I was doing. And so it was fun, it was very complex, and that idea of being creative and thinking outside of the box but being grounded in economics was, I think it's become a common thread in every piece of my career since then.
I love it. So let's talk about the other side of the brain there, being influenced by your global travels, and you lived, across the world, New York, Hong Kong, where else? Tokyo, Paris, and San Francisco. How is that global perspective really giving you that competitive advantage when you're evaluating and reviewing opportunities for investment?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And honestly, it's one that I ask myself a lot because I took a little bit of a career detour, right? Like, I was on this trajectory in finance. I stepped off to join an early stage startup, basically took a 90% pay cut and, moved in with my boyfriend's parents on Long Island and was hustling in the
Sounds too close
startup
to home.
world. And then moved abroad and lived in Hong Kong and set up this fund and was in Tokyo and was doing venture in a very different way. And then I moved to the Bay Area and I kind of looked back on that experience and I was like, wow, that was really awesome. But I feel like I'm behind compared
How,
to the people that I knew who just, did the classic trajectory. They did business school, they went into venture, they worked at Meta or Google. And I was sort of like, did I miss the boat? Was I so intent on doing something different that I missed the ability to go deep on where I am? And I think where I landed on it, and obviously I'm biased toward trying to make meaning out of the choices that I made.
don't we all?
Um, but I think living globally, from a hard skills perspective, um, gave me insight into what is now very commonly seen as the future of work. Like, I was building and functioning as a globally distributed team, working with international contractors, doing all of the things that Silicon Valley is now embraced, but 15 years ago it wasn't consensus. So I do think I got insight from that perspective. And also living abroad, I think engenders this sense of deep empathy where you cannot enter a situation assuming that you are right
No
and you
way.
know everything. You have to start with, I don't know. I have to ask questions. I have to be curious and open. And I think that is a mindset that has served me really well over the years.
I love that too, and it's so funny when you look, because we all look back, right? That's what we do, and like, oh, do we make the right choice? But you look at it now, like, you know what? Those decisions were right at the time, and or right looking back on it now, and they really set you up for success where you are, and it forms your having that cultural awareness is such a superpower. And
Yep.
how did it work for you? I mean, I was reading in the notes here that you're fluent-ish in a few of the languages. Going through that process too forces you to assimilate and really be able to communicate on a one-to-one level instead of always
Yep.
assuming that everyone speaks English around the world, which I hate, right? Like, it's like, why do you think
Yeah.
you just roll into a country and start yapping in English and everyone's going to understand you? What language resonated with you the most?
I mean, I think I speak French and Japanese in addition to English. I think they're both so interesting and unique in their own way. I started learning Japanese when I was very young. And one of the things that really interested me about it is that it was very methodical and mathematical, and um, it was extremely precise. And what I think is interesting now, having lived in Japan, is seeing that connection between language and culture, and how language is just an expression of culture. And that is the Japanese mindset. It's very precise. It is very coded. There is meaning in everything that everybody says. And even down to the last detail, like in Japanese, the verb comes at the end of a sentence. And so it is so inappropriate to cut someone off when you're having a conversation, because you genuinely don't know what they're saying until they finish the sentence, which is very different than English or French, where you are saying subject verb and then the rest is like the details. And so you can have a conversation realistically where you cut people off and you go back and forth, and that's just like not part of how you converse there in Japan.
It's such an American thing to cut people off in the middle of the I laugh about it too. We all have that one friend that's like the chronic cutter offer. And
Oh,
you have to
yeah.
kind of like, like bite your tongue. You're like, stop it, dude. Like,
I
just
mean,
that's
if there's the cutter offer and then there's the I know everything about everything person. And so when you get them both in one person, that's where I really struggle.
we call that the one upper, and I feel like I'm on an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. So switching.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you often say, quote, thinking like a VC is important for everyone right now. What does that mean? Let's break that down. Midway through 2025, why should everyone be thinking like a VC, and how?
So a VC mindset is primed for abundance. You are naturally only able to invest in a very set number of companies. But in order to do that successfully, you need to evaluate a very large amount of them and figure out, how do I make sure I'm evaluating the right ones, getting access to them in the first place? How am I analyzing which ones to pursue? And then once I do pursue one of these select opportunities, how do I make sure that it's successful? And I think in a world of technology, but even more so in a world of AI, no matter what you decide to do, actually, your choices are uh, virtually unlimited. You have so many different paths you can take. There are so many different ways to make a living. There are so many different companies you could work for. And so being able to think through and leverage that mindset of, how do I take an entire universe of possibilities and figure out how to select the right one, and more importantly, the right one for me, so that I can make it a success, is, I think, more important than ever.
I love that perspective. I really do. For me, the big aha, if I'm taking a page out of the VC book, is, it sounds cliche, but really hearing and seeing the signals through the noise. And you hear this a lot. And for me, it's more than a buzzword. It's really being able to focus and distill and follow trends. And then if I want to bring it down to a more micro level, for me, like, which path, for example, we talk about the recruiting market. I'm a recruiter by trade. It is cyclical with the economy, right? Like, is it going to be long-term, short-term? What do I have to do to future-proof myself? What's happening with AI? How's AI? Is AI going to, quote unquote, take my recruiter job? Parts of it, or I could choose to embrace it and be a leader in that space and use the technology for good. So that's the way I embrace sorry, hold on one second. Let me get rid of that. That's the way that I choose to embrace it. So I want to talk about your book, Breaking Into Venture. Why did you decide to write the book, and who's it for?
So yeah, a lot of people ask me, like, how did you have time to write a book? I actually wrote a book to save time, because I just was having the same conversation over and over and over again, around, how does venture actually work? What does it take to succeed within it? And I felt there was a gap in the market of people explaining how venture works from a technical perspective. But there wasn't anyone talking about how you actually play the game. And similar to really any career, you can have the math down perfectly. You can understand the exact, all your I's dotted and your T's
Right.
crossed. But if you don't know how to play the game, if you don't know what actually matters, then you're never going to get your foot in the door in the first place. And once you're there, you're not going to understand what forces are determining who's going to actually be successful. And historically, venture has been such a closed community that as I embarked on my journey myself, the only way I really figured those things out was, one, by making the mistakes myself,
Doing them.
and two, finding more experienced people and taking them out to drinks and getting them a couple drinks, in.
Loosen them up a little bit. Yep.
And then you start to hear the real stories of how things work. And that's what I wanted to bring to everybody, because it is a privilege to have that insider knowledge and that experience. And I wanted to make it a little bit easier for the people coming behind me.
That just got to put yourself in the game and on the field. And I think that's where people, especially in this world, and I love your take on this, right? Like, are we over glamorizing entrepreneurship? Are we over glamorizing, it's cool and sexy to be a VC. Everyone's making all this money, all these crazy. That's not the reality of it. What you see on Instagram and in their private jets and, hanging out in Mykonos, that's not the truth. Give us a little insight into the hard, dirty work behind the scenes in the trenches.
Yeah. I mean, I like to say it's not just about deciding what you want, it's deciding what you're willing to give up to get there. And that's what I think a lot of people don't recognize. I hate people that try to pretend like VC jobs suck, because I think this is the absolute best job in the world. I'm so happy that I can make a living out of it. If I didn't need to work and I didn't need to make money, it's what I would do. So I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that it is not an incredibly fun job. But in the trenches, I think what makes VC challenging is you have no idea if you're good at it for a really long time, and maybe not ever. And that's where I think a lot of people, especially if they're coming from operator roles or they're successful founders, they really struggle, because you're on this extremely long feedback loop, and measuring your progress is something that's really, really hard to do. And you feel often like, okay, I'm busy all the time, but I'm not really sure that I'm accomplishing anything. And that can be super frustrating.
Well, you called that an interesting point too, because it's not instant gratification, right? It's not like you're closing a small deal. Like, these things take time to incubate. Due diligence. If people we could spend a whole podcast talking about due diligence, which I'm not going to do because that'll bore half my audience here. But that's the hard work, and understanding what evaluation means, and really understanding the different tiers within a deal. And there's so much to unpack there. But it's such a long play. And then you have to see how the company that you're investing in plays out and what that looks like. It's not an immediate return. Let me ask you this. What did you learn about yourself through the process of writing this book?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that before.
I think
what did I learn about myself?
Every author goes through that process, whether it be how they create. Maybe they find a passion for writing. I've asked this question when people say, I fucking, pardon my French, hate writing, but I've already committed to this book, and they learn to be a better writer, and they learn to go deeper and explore down their own rabbit holes inside their head. And that's the gold of the book.
Yeah. I think I learned that first of all, it was a great reminder of the fact that I love writing. It's one of those things that I really do lose myself in when you talk about getting into a flow state. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, that when I was young, I wanted to be a writer, and then I figured out it doesn't pay very well. And so the fact that I can be a VC but still write is so fun. But I think second, I'm a very, and this is why I'm actually working on my next book. It's called Beyond the Pitch, The Psychology of Raising Venture Funding. And it's geared towards founders. And I always knew this secret. Most VCs, and including myself, are extremely emotional. And I think that's what was so eye-opening for me writing this book, and then like sitting down and reading it in one go, is that I think my strength is the ability to harness those emotions and then analyze them and put them in context. And as a writer, being able to tap into those emotions with stories and feelings, but then explain what the meaning is a unique strength. But most venture investors, when you think of finance and investing, that we're like analyzing spreadsheets and stuff, and we are doing that. But at the end of the day, we're also very emotional. And that's a secret that I think once founders figure that out, it changes their perspective.
Right. And once you start to find success, you learn to trust your gut more, right? To say that, hey, my emotions are telling me something positive or negative for a reason based on past performance.
Right.
And you learn to trust that more. And that comes with experience, and you have to put yourself out there. But I want to double down. I want to double down and double back on something really important when it comes to writing. I love to write. I love to craft posts. I love to journal. And I do journaling through now I journal through audio messages through an app, which dictates everything to me. And then I craft it around that. But you talk about writing, and I'll elaborate on that after we're done here. Getting back to human, are we really losing that with AI? I feel it's like in this generally lazy-ish culture that people are using AI as a crutch and not a tool, and we're going to lose so much of the art of writing. What are your thoughts?
I certainly think for the majority of people that don't love writing as an art, that will change the way in which they write. But I don't believe that AI will replace the need to write or make it impossible to write anything new or different. I think you could say that for any technology of becoming a crutch. I mean, social media or Netflix, the fact that you can just totally numb yourself and not do anything productive.
Oh, I love doing that.
Because there's a screen. Exactly. I mean, so if it's using AI or it's doing something else, there's plenty of opportunities to not use your brain to the fullest of its potential. And unfortunately, some people are going to do that, but not everybody.
I think there's a happy medium. I know it when a lot of my writing, I use them, and I wish they were sponsored. I talk about Grammarly a lot, but what Grammarly is doing is it's just overlaying on top of my writing for grammatical, spelling, sentence structure, but the core of the message is still there. So I think if you find a tool where you're not just, regurgitate, yapping something into ChatGPT with a prompt and using that as gospel, I think there's a happy medium there. So shifting the AI conversation to business, right? And we talk about GPTs and no-code platforms. It's even easier to start companies now. Is this a advantage, or is it now anybody? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Is it opening up the access for more people to move down this entrepreneurial path and try things, or is the barrier to entry so low that you're getting flooded with so much inbound? Like, where do we stand with that right now?
It's a complex picture, and the answer is both. We saw the same trend where, with the advent of AWS and other cloud technologies, the cost of starting a company dramatically reduced. And that was big. It removed a big barrier to entry to entrepreneurship. And I think that is largely beneficial, but it also muddies the waters for investors who don't know how to properly filter through the opportunity set, given there's so much noise and harder to find the signal. And I think this is just another step function change in that same direction where, on one hand, it makes it possible to start a company without initial funding or with a very small amount of funding. It makes it, you don't need a computer science degree. You don't need a fancy CTO. Like, there are so many ways you can build a new product and get it out into market and start experimenting. Ultimately, I think that the life of an entrepreneur is a very difficult one. And going back to that concept of, it's not about what you want, it's about what you're willing to give up to get there. I think there will still only be a small select number of people that are truly crazy enough to build a career as an entrepreneur. But that doesn't mean that there isn't value in creating products or getting them off the ground or experimenting. So I think it's that mindset of building, creating, trying that is beneficial for every part of the ecosystem, even if it means you don't actually build a venture-funded startup.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you could learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you. What's the biggest thing that you've had to give up in this career to be successful in this career? You've talked about it, so I'm going to throw it right back at you.
I mean, definitely, I was just with some family in Indiana, unfortunately at a funeral, but, nobody works in tech or venture. And they were asking me, like, what are your hobbies? And I was like, I have no hobbies. I basically, all my friends are through work. I'm so entrenched in this universe that
Interesting.
I'm don't have a lot of other things going on. And that's been a theme throughout my career where I'm just so deep into what I'm doing that it forms my identity. And I think that's great because I love it, but it can be, kind of sad, I guess.
So what is that hobby that maybe you had before you went down this path that you love? Let's just say that you could continue. Say I just added 7 hours to your day, right?
Yeah.
Your 31 hour days. What would be the hobby that you would add back in? I've never even asked this question. It's such a weird question. I look at things that I want to do.
I don't travel for pleasure anymore, so I would love the opportunity to do that again. I used to play the violin and paint. It'd be fun to do that. The idea of just I also have 2 very young kids, so I think I'm also somewhat
that takes the hours out of the day.
It basically sucks up all your time. But and then I spent my 20s building companies and building venture funds and living abroad, and so I think relatively for a lot of women ended up getting married later, having kids later, and I don't feel badly about that, but I think it is a different path than a lot of other people have taken. And, I'm hanging out with my family. They've got kids going to college and I've got a 1-year-old and we're the same age.
I got a couple of those too. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had
totally
kids
different.
early. Yeah. I mean, it totally is. So let's shift gears a little bit. So what's Semper all about? Tell everyone out there, Semper Virens, what do you guys do?
Semper Virens, we invest in early stage companies that are transforming the relationship between employers and employees. So our model is based on this idea that the employer-employee relationship has been disrupted by technology and even more so by AI and
COVID.
And all these things.
All these factors.
But the employer-employee relationship was established as a bedrock of society post-World War II. The government and corporations made an agreement that the government will keep us safe and employers are going to provide you with your health care. They're going to provide you with your job, community, things to do all day, and money. And it's a big problem that relationship has been fractured. And so now we need to find new ways of delivering healthcare, jobs, meaning, money, financial security. And that's what we're investing in.
So what are some of those innovations that have been so eye-opening to you from an emotional standpoint, going back to that gut feeling as an investor, that you were attracted to this company and you went down that path? What were the core problems and issues that they were trying to solve? Let's get specific here.
I'll give you a couple examples. We were early investors in a company called Spring Health, which is a mental health care benefit delivered through the employer. And when I first met the team at Spring, I was actually working at a different fund, and the partnership there was not bought in on the idea that mental health was a true need. And when we brought Spring Health into Semper Virens, it was an obvious decision that, the past generation we worked with, physically. And so our physical health was the biggest challenge for getting our jobs done. But in a digital economy, we're working mostly with our minds. And so it makes sense that mental health is the next frontier. And So that was one where the combination of the team, the product, they had this kind of AI driven precision intake process that was able to very quickly and accurately identify what are someone's mental health needs and what is the best path of treatment. And then able to actually calculate that ROI for the employer of what does it mean to have somebody who is more present and productive at work, that takes less leave,
Right.
that
What's the
stays
ROI on that?
longer. Exactly. And so that was a really special combination. But ultimately, and I talk about this in the book, timing is everything. And Spring Health was also benefiting from this growing cultural zeitgeist around mental health. You started to see celebrities stepping up and talking about it. It was on everybody's minds. And then COVID just blew it up out of the water. And so there was that combination of a unique team, a really solid product and technology, but also, some real tailwinds for growing the business. So, and they're doing great. They're helping people. So I think that there's also that mission-driven aspect, which is really powerful.
But I'm always curious, and I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago where we talk about a lot of these benefits where employees are scared to raise their hand because fear of repercussion. If I raise my hand and say, I want to take advantage of mental health, is that going to trigger something internally that says, Adam has an issue, we got to keep an eye on him? And this product, I'm not trying to pitch it to you, they added a layer of anonymity on top of it, right? So you could get the access to it without your employer seeing it. I'm just curious, like, did that factor in at all, like from an adoption standpoint by employees saying, this is great and all, but I don't know if I want to say I need help with something?
I think that's the power of making it a healthcare benefit. If you have an EAP program where it's, or ERGs or some other way of, where it becomes obvious to the people around you that you're seeking help, that would, I think, create the barrier that you're describing.
The stigma, right.
But like, your employer doesn't know if you go to the doctor. I mean, they might see it in your claims cost, but they're not tracking, Allison went to a primary care physician on September 4th. And so that's where it sits really nicely, being able to see someone virtually in a way that's convenient for your schedule, and that, the people around you don't need to know about, is really powerful.
So Allison, if you don't mind, take out your crystal ball. Let's put your crystal ball in front of you right now, or the magic 8-ball. Remember that toy we used to have and shake it and the little pyramid would show up on the inside? What is the next big trend in the workplace that you have your eye on? Getting some alpha here.
Yeah, the digital replacement of labor, particularly for the entry-level workforce.
Let's talk about that. About that. Should new employees and college grads be scared that the amount of open roles is going to be taken over by tech and AI?
Absolutely. The way AI agents are functioning today is very similar to an entry-level employee. You have to train them. You have to spend time with them. You have to feed them information. But ultimately, they learn fast. They don't talk back. They've got a great attitude, and you don't have to promote them.
They don't talk back, and they don't need all the snacks, correct?
I mean, so I think there is right now not necessarily swaths of entry-level roles getting laid off, but they are definitely rethinking, one, the skill sets that is actually necessary for someone to succeed in this type of environment, and two, where can you give more senior folks higher leverage by pairing them with AI agents? And that is very, very real. HR folks don't like to talk about it because it sounds bad, and everybody is so optimistic. And every previous, industrial revolution, we've seen jobs getting created, and that may be true, but it happens on a very long time horizon. So I truly believe in the next 5 to 10 years, it is going to be a very, very hard market for young folks that are not thinking entrepreneurially.
Wow. I couldn't agree with you more on that. We're moving so fast. The speed of adoption, the speed of technology right now. And I always say, no matter what level you're at in your career or your life, you have to future-proof yourself. The tech is not going anywhere. Listen, by the time any new tech hits mainstream consumerism, the train has already left the station. It's already out there. But the piece that was the aha thing that you said before to me was pairing the tech with more senior, and by senior I mean older age folks in the workforce. And those are the folks that really need to be jumping on this, because they're the ones where the tech is coming right behind you, or someone who knows how to use it, who's younger, faster, better, cheaper than you is coming. And that's how you do it. I mean, I preach to everybody who's older than me. They come to me and they say, Adam, you seem to be very knowledgeable in the AI and the tech world. What advice would you give me? I say, use it. Use it in your personal life. Try it. And then I whip out my phone and I start to show them things on like different, like I didn't know, someone said to me, I didn't know there was more than one chat GPT. And I said, well, within my chat GPT, I could choose 15, 20, 30 different based on like if I want to do graphics, if I want to do deep research, deep learning, and it blew their mind. So be curious. Be curious. After doing almost 500 of these interviews, the word is curiosity.
Yes.
So when you meet a founder, how do you dig in to see if they could figure it out and be curious? What's that line of questioning like?
Typically similar to what you're doing here, right? You dig into their past, understand why they've made certain decisions. We do a lot of back channel referencing. So you can't, and this is a big lesson in Beyond the Pitch and in breaking into venture as well. But, if you have a 30-minute or a 1-hour pitch with an entrepreneur, you're only going to know what they're telling you. But if you have a longer term relationship with them, then they show you who they really are. And so that's really the job for us, is to figure out, one, how can you actually build those relationships over time so that when you are evaluating a company, it's not net new to you and that founder is not net new to you. And two, if you are in a situation where you have a limited track record with someone, how can you leverage your network to understand them holistically and find out, I've done references on founders where people said, I wouldn't touch that guy with a 10-foot pole, or, he's nice, but he's not a killer, or I would do anything for this person. And if they call me to work for them, I would go in a second. I don't even care how much they would pay me. Like, those are the things that people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's what you really need to be thinking about as a founder.
And that, everyone listening, is called reputation. What people say behind your back when you're not listening. So I'm taking it that you're betting on the jockey and not the horse in most cases when you're evaluating an opportunity.
It really has to be both. There are VCs that are willing to write blank checks to founders and say, hey, whatever this person does, I'll back it. I personally believe you need the right combination of founder and market and timing. And if you don't know what market they're in, it's really hard to figure out what could be the timing of the market, how things coalesce in terms of tailwinds or headwinds. So I think if you have two companies, they're doing the exact same thing. Obviously, you want to pick the one that's a better founder. But you really kind of have to have both.
Yeah, definitely. Allison, what's keeping you up at night these days besides the two little kids? I thank God I'm 7. My youngest is 7, oldest is 13. Thank God they're sleeping through the night, except for those rare cases when the little guy has a bad dream. But thank God I'm past that phase. But what's keeping you up at night business-wise?
Definitely FOMO. There's just so much going on right now. And I think the biggest challenge in venture is actually, my biggest fear is not making the wrong decision about an investment. It's about not ever getting the opportunity to make that decision in the first place. So what am I completely missing? What am I not getting the opportunity to evaluate? And that is the FOMO stress that is inherent to the VC mentality.
So how do you balance that out? How do you like mental checklist of the wins? You say, no, I made some good calls. I can't be involved in everything. Right.
Everything is measurable. So what I spend a lot of time on and really push our team to do is figure out how can we measure our progress. And one thing we track really closely, which is a KPI for a lot of venture investors, is something called coverage ratio, which is, for every company that gets funded every quarter, what percentage of those companies did we see? And so, it's something that's hard to track on a day-to-day basis. And obviously there's a time lag because people don't really announce their fundraises until the following quarter. But I think the most important thing in venture and anywhere is you have to measure your progress. So sure, maybe you make some massive assumptions and they end up not being right, but you can do it. And so that's what we focus a lot of time on, is figuring out how to measure that.
I love that metric, because things have to be measurable, and you can't be everywhere. You can't see everything and you can't do everything, but the things that are in front of your plate, do them and do them well. Allison, what is the single greatest piece of career advice that you've received that you pay forward? I didn't say this was going to be easy.
Yeah. Best piece of career.
Maybe something, maybe a mentor said to you when you were, early in your career that you just stuck with you, that you passed forward.
Yeah. I've always kind of taken a pretty entrepreneurial path. So and I obviously grew up in a little bit of a different, very New York finance cutthroat type environment. I think the best piece of advice I got was that nobody cares about you as much as you do. And I think I take that to heart, and I've always operated in that way of you have to make your own opportunities, and you are the only one that can make the right decisions for you. And so it's great to get advice and it's great to have mentors, but you cannot expect them to deliver you things on a silver platter. You have to go out and do it yourself.
I love that. And I swear by that. Take your shot.
Yeah.
And once you step into that and you start taking shots, you'll take more shots, and you'll learn that it's a numbers game, and you'll learn to be okay with losing. Because that's what
I've lost a lot.
Ooh, and every great investor. So last but not least, Allison, if someone's looking at your background and your career on paper, they're like, damn, Allison is super successful. But Allison, let me ask you this. At this stage in your life and your career, how do you define success?
I define success by the number of successful people that I create. So whether it's on my team or founders or my family, I think, I'm only as good as the people around me. And if I can help make them better, that makes me better too.
I love it. I love it. Allison, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast here. I want everyone to check out, we need music, right? We need music. Music just kind of wraps it up here. Check out her book, Breaking Into Venture, available on Amazon. I'm going to link it up in the show notes. Check it out. Also connect with her on LinkedIn, follow her on LinkedIn. And where else could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, that's exactly where to go.
Awesome. Allison, thank you so much for joining me. And everyone at home, if this show meant something to you and it resonated, leave a review. Rating it goes a long way. Sharing means caring. You know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on socials. Remember, Instagram, it's at NHP Talent. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.